Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Please bear with us today. My mic had some issues during recording. In order to not have to scrap or cut the episode, we've pulled other audio, but it's rough. Let's get into it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Market Mystics. As you can see, we're in studio today, which is pretty rare and really only happens when the great and wonderful Dr. Craig Farney is with us.
Wow.
It's true. Although the last time we had you on
Was Zoom.
We weren't?
No, we did it on Zoom.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I've slept since then a couple times.
You slipped or slept?
Yeah, both.
It is wintertime here.
That's right.
Well, we wanted to have Craig back today. I've been talking in the last few months about money mindsets and knowing your worth and believing your worth and working from that place. And Craig also has talked about this a little bit, but he has a superpower, if you will, where he knows how to test us to be able to tell what we believe ourselves to be worth. And so we did that before. It's in the bonus content. You should check it out because it's, well,
It was fun.
It was fun.
It was a lot of fun. So to see that part, go to YouTube on your desktop, click the join button, become a member, and you can watch the whole thing and find out how high our numbers went or how low they were. Maybe you're surprised. This would be fun in just this video to have people leave comments and guess how much they think we thought we were worth.
That would.
Please do not do that. I'm begging you.
Oh, please do.
I think it would be great.
I do too.
Oh, that's fine. I see. Here's my thing. Let's just dive in.
Let's do it.
I have a real aversion to other people telling me what I'm worth.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is why I'm like, please don't do that to me.
Why?
Let's not go there because I don't think it's valid. Sorry, I love you, but I don't. It's a hard thing for me to accept that somebody can have a valid opinion in that area without knowing all of the intricacies and nuance and the whole of who I am.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. I want to rely on the Lord to say that and for that to be like between us.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are you?
There's a
afraid of
money
what they'll
mindset.
answer?
I'm afraid that they will answer.
I know. And are you afraid of their answer?
I don't know that I'm afraid. I don't want it spoken into me. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want that to be a voice that my body hears, that my soul hears, that my spirit hears that may contradict what is said, like from the Lord who knows full picture. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. What I'm curious about is why do you even give validation to it then?
I don't know that I want to, but just because my mind doesn't want to, does that mean that my body doesn't accept it?
So here's my concept of we are all energy beings, which we've talked about before, and we emanate an energy field. If your energy field is strong enough, it doesn't matter what's spoken into it because it gets transformed.
That's true.
Now,
It probably depends on who's saying it too.
I understand.
Yeah.
What I'm really trying to help you be aware of is what is the aversion to somebody saying something? Because in some essence, it's just, I get the idea of you don't want to take it on and all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we get completely healthy, we don't even have to worry about that.
That's interesting. Because I was also just thinking, it depends on who it is.
What if they said a number higher than yours?
Then maybe I would believe it. But the risk is them saying something lower and it being from someone whose opinion I really respect. Do you know what I mean? If it's just somebody on the street, it's not going to matter. Right. I'm rubber and they're glue, but if it's someone, Josh, if you were to say like, really, Kim, I think you're worth about $1.50. Right. It would affect me because you're someone that I really respect and we have relationship. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the aversion. I don't want to hear it.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think it makes sense. It makes sense what both of you are saying. It's something we've talked about even in like asking for prayer or having people say, I'll pray for you, because it's like, well, wait, do you know, can I trust that you will pray the heart of the Father over that situation, or are you going to pray what you think should be the outcome? And is that the energy that I want coming around me? I mean, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is once you reach a high enough energy point, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what happens, because you are so rock solid in what you believe that it takes the negative energy and transforms it to life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I also will say, I don't know if I know anyone who's at that level where they can do that with everything that's spoken towards them.
Yeah,
that's valid too. I mean, are you there?
Oh, yeah.
Are you going to teach us about this today, Craig?
Oh, yeah, I'm there, obviously. I'm the most humble guy you will ever meet. No, I'm not there. I do believe in the concept.
I believe in the concept.
And I guess that's why I want to keep moving towards that. And anytime I'm aware, if I'm having that reaction to it, then I'm going, okay, that's an area where I haven't reached that. So how do I reach that?
Yeah.
I don't want to have fear in any area of life.
Yeah. Do you think it's always fear? It doesn't feel like fear to me.
I think the difficulty, my mom and I have this conversation frequently, because I'll use the word fear because in my mind it's conveying a certain concept.
Sure.
And it doesn't convey the same concept. So I think there are different words that maybe express how you're interacting with it, but the concept is the same. It's you are not at peace with it. You are not joy. You are not love in the midst of that thing.
Yeah. It feels risky. I think that's the word that I would use, is it feels risky to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why does it feel risky? That's, I mean,
right. Same answer.
Right. We've gone back. The thing we've talked about before is, to me, everything always starts as a thought. If you can get at the thought has no emotion to it in and of itself. If you can get that, then there's no emotion to move you. Because again, emotion is energy in motion. And the thing I get from what you're saying too is, if you are concerned about somebody's value of you, you're allowing them to dictate your state.
Right.
Their thoughts is controlling your emotions. That's not
Their
healthy.
thought is controlling my emotions.
And your overall being state to a degree.
Maybe. I'm tracking with what you're saying. I'm just thinking, I think that's what I'm avoiding, is not opening the door for that, for the ability for someone to have that kind of authority, like to speak that into me.
I realize that.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And I think when you are at a healthy place, it really doesn't matter, because the guy on the street, he can say the same thing and it has no value. It's because you've put value into somebody else now.
Right.
And you're putting more value into their opinion.
Yes.
But the truth is it doesn't matter, because again, it's just an opinion. Just even because somebody you care about says you're only worth $1.50 doesn't make it true.
It's absolutely,
right.
That's valid. Yes.
And I understand what you're doing too, because I think it's having self-awareness that says, okay, I'm not at a place where I can interact with that in the most healthy way. How do I get to that place?
Yeah.
How do I get to where, even if Josh says you're only worth $1.50, okay, that's your opinion. I don't agree with that opinion, and I'm completely whole within myself.
Right.
In fact, I think even your response transforms his opinion.
That's
because the energy you emanate
true.
back out is going, no, I'm not resonating with that.
True.
So, just thought.
I like it.
Good.
We've talked about this a lot, but like the verse about being transformed by the renewing of your mind, like we just talked about this recently. Like that's really what we're talking about. Like it is your, like, guarding your mind, guarding your heart, like, to what comes in and what goes out. Right. Because just as much as someone you care about speaking value over your life can impact you, what you say about it can be significantly more impactful. So like before we
That
did
is
the
very true.
testing, like since we've known we were going to do this for
A few weeks.
a few weeks, and I've been like consciously preparing, like I was like, I'm going to get a good number because Craig tested me 2 years ago for this, and my number was $10,000. And I was like, I know within me that I'm worth more than that. But
Yeah.
my body didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And at the time when he tested me, none of the ways we tested were above that number. And it was like, that was really challenging. And then even though the number was higher today, it got hung up on that number because mentally I was focused on that number of being a number. I like, please think you're worth more. Please think you're worth more. But by thinking, please be worth more than 10,000, I'm still putting energy into 10,000.
You're still being hung up there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it was really intriguing because as we're going up the ladder, you know, the energy is strong. We get to 10 to 15, the energy is really weak. And then we go above that and the energy gets strong again. And it's like that was a hang up because that has been an area of belief that I was worried about being stuck in again.
It's interesting. It's like a threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like if you can get past this, then it was so much easier, right? But here's this point in which you need to arrive and you need to get past it. And probably like you either need to, I mean, you obviously know about this more than I do, but I would think it's probably something you need to work on. Like same, I'd be curious to know if, I mean, I got real weak at a certain point. Like, is that a threshold as well? You know, because we didn't test higher.
Right.
But if we did, what would it have been like there? Are there those points where you get hung up and if you can just get past it, then you're golden.
Yeah.
You know?
Now, it was also interesting too. He got up to a high enough level. He did go weak again, which was $1 billion.
Yes. And maybe someday, like, that will change as well because this was 2 years in the making to change those numbers. And so, you know, what does it take to really even get to that? I think probably within myself, like, I know what $10,000 feels like. I have no grid for what $1 billion feels like.
Yeah.
I have no concept other than TV and movies and books and interviews of what to even do with $1 billion. And so I wonder if that's where my body's...
a part of you that does.
Well, I mean, like I'm like, okay, I would do this with investments and this with land and this with people and projects. But it's a totally different thing to steward 8 zeros than it is to steward 3. And I think that's like, I think the reason that my body got weaker there is because I haven't begun to even think about that level. Like I've not gone there and started planning for it. And this is something we've talked about. Like, I don't think God gives you wealth above where you're capable of stewarding because it destroys you. So like people who win the lottery or a lot of professional athletes who have no money management skills, they win the lottery, their career ends, and within a few years they're bankrupt again because they have there was never a plan for it. So the opportunity opened, they said yes to the opportunity, this vast amount of energy flowed into it and then destroyed what it was because they hadn't built the riverbeds, they hadn't built the dams and the channels and the things to contain the flow of energy. And that's what I've been working on since we like planned this, was like really the number I wanted to get to was 1 million. I was like, can I get myself from 10,000 to 1 million? Can I dream about, okay, if we had $1 million tomorrow, what would I do with it? And really start planning and saying, okay, I would put this percentage here, this percentage here, this percentage here, and then really structuring my mindset around, okay, like I think I could righteously steward this amount of money. But then above it, it's like, well, then you get the private jet and the yacht, and it's like the house in France, and like, not that any of that is wrong, but if at some point, like, just in the way I'm saying that, what I'm saying is I would spend the money until I was at a level I was comfortable with.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So it's like you need to first build a place for it to land.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it will have nowhere to go but away. Right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I've been doing lately is I've been listening to this guy, Brian Scott. He does what he calls activations, which is basically about activating neurologic pathways. And one of the things, one I'm listening to right now is about being a millionaire and having a millionaire mindset. And one of the things that he keeps saying that really strikes me is people that have a lot of wealth, they think differently. They act differently. It's not about the money. It's about what you do. It's about impact. It's about influence. And so I think what we associate money with is important to take into account too.
Yeah.
So, because for you, take your testing, when you hit 1 billion, all of a sudden money changed, the association changed. What's the change? I mean, because it's funny, because we could get to 999 million and you were strong. So you're only talking about $1 more million, and all of a sudden it went weak. Why? Because there's something in that word that resonates different with you.
Yeah. It's that extra comma.
Yeah. It's why is that? That's the same type of game that, you know, something is $99.99. Well, it's not 100.
Yeah.
So I can afford it.
Yeah. I used to think that like, I had a boss once who told me about like the psychology of marketing and how you make it the 99 cents. Like gas is never $3, it's $2.99 or $2.98.
Right.
Which in your pocketbook is the exact same as $3.
Right.
But psychologically, you see it differently. You know, that TV's not $500, it's $499.97. Like,
right.
And that's such an interesting thing that mentally that round number is hard. We've Bree and I have been talking about this because we've been watching the rise of Bitcoin, and we started following it. I keep looking this way because Bree is right below the camera. Hello, honey. We started watching it somewhere around the 60s, somewhere around 60,000. And we were even internally discussing how 70, 80, 90, and 100 were all round number mental hurdles that it actually takes way more energy to go from 79,999 to 80,001.
Right.
Like it takes way more buying power at that level than it does to go from 79,000 to 79.9. Like it takes way more power to jump that hurdle because it's the round numbers are such a mental hurdle. And you watch that when Bitcoin first broke 100,000, it broke 100,000, and then pretty quickly it dove back down to the low 90s. And some people were like doomsday, oh, it hit its number, it's never going back up. But it's a mental hurdle. And there was probably a lot of people who were like, wow, if it ever hits 100,000, I'm selling. So it gets there, and then all these people are flushed out of it. But then what's it do? It turns around and goes back up, and today or yesterday hit 108,000. And we've talked a little bit about this, but that's the difference between smart money and dumb money. Is that's actually price manipulation by market makers to create it gets it to 100. All the retail investors like, wow, it's amazing. So they drop it back down to the low 90s, and the retail investors go, oh my gosh, it's done going up. I better get out. And then it turns around and they shoot the price back up to way above where you were at. And it's like an attempt to slowly make it harder to obtain and harder to obtain. But that's the way investing has been done for a very long time. And I'm not making a judgment on right or wrong, but it's just the way it works. And so it's that they know that there's these mental hurdles at these numbers. And so they play with it to optimize their gains. And it's just so interesting that it happens around round numbers. Why is that? Why is why is it 10 bigger than 9?
It's not so much that 10's bigger than 9, it's that you see 9.99 as 9, not 10.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, 10 is bigger than 9. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, yeah, that's more money. Can I, that's more expensive. One of the things I found interesting in this activation is the difference between seeing a cost versus an investment, the difference between seeing an expense versus a growth opportunity. That's one of the things that why do we think about money the way we do? You're talking about people that are controlling the market. Why are we not thinking that way?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Are you thinking about one of the ones that's like following the wave, or are you one creating the wave?
It makes me think back to what you were saying about the difference between the way that people think about money when they're wealthy and when they're not. Mm-hmm. And I was within myself, I was thinking about these thresholds. And I wonder, are those thresholds like the amount of money that we need to make a living? And then beyond that, it shifts into wealth, which is then, this is the money that's the tool that accomplishes other things. But it's not like life. It's not life or death. Like, I think making a living is actually a term that is probably more close to reality than we realize, because I think some of those numbers, those thresholds define, are we going to make it or are we not going to make it? Are we going to have a good life or are we not going to have a good life? And obviously that's determined within our own selves and what we believe that to be. But then once you get up to the higher numbers, why are you strong again? Because that turns into, well, what amount of wealth are you able to hold? What could you be capable of having?
Right.
But it's like there's that tension point, that friction point almost, that you just have to get to find that security. You know what I mean? And I wonder if that kind of plays into this too.
Absolutely. Well, and what I get at is, I think one of the things I'm working on myself a lot is, whatever number it is, where did I learn that?
Yeah.
Well, where did that come into play? Were you born that way? Not likely, though I do think there's an aspect in our genetics that's there. That I think wealthy people tend to propagate.
Yeah. Well, wealthy families tend to marry other wealthy families, and it stands out when they don't.
Right.
But that is in some energetic level is continuing the mindset of wealth.
Well, and the thing I was thinking about a lot too is, and something I've really focused on lately, we tend to equate wealth with money. It's not just money. It's, I mean, which, you know, you can get into the happiness and all that type of stuff too. It's influence, I think, is the biggest thing that I'm realizing is impact and influence. That's what the purpose of money's for.
Well, money is an energy that you can flow into any different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the easiest to associate with wealth, but wealth is also time,
Mm-hmm.
probably way more valuable than money.
Absolutely.
I recently listened to a podcast where they were interviewing this person, and he said what really changed his finances was the mindset of, instead of dreaming about what goals do I want to achieve, he started dreaming about how do I want to feel when I achieve that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, instead of it being an arbitrary number, it was associated with a feeling, and he was actually able to achieve that feeling way quicker than he was with just the arbitrary number.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I just achieved that goal. I didn't think that was possible, but this is how I wanted to feel, and I feel that way now. And then it's easier to move that into other things.
Right. Feelings is what we tend to use to validate reality. Mm-hmm. And if you can learn to feel the feeling ahead of time, you're going to draw the experience to you. And that's one of the biggest fallacies, is most of us think if I have the right environment, I'll feel a certain feeling. And the problem is they get in the environment, they don't feel the feeling. Or it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. And it's learning to, I've said this many times, we live to feel. Well, what is it we really want to feel? And I'll even take it a step further, because I had a session with somebody that was doing some of this work on me. And she said, if you use the word want, you're lacking. So I've even kind of got to where I don't use the word want as much anymore. It's like, this is who I am. And I have to feel it with it. Otherwise, it's just a wish. Mm-hmm. If you can feel it, then it starts to become your imagination. And that's really where everything comes from, is our imagination. The problem for most of us is we're imagining an unhealthy life, because we're using our creative energy to try to prevent a negative thing from happening. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, we're actually creating the problem.
Right. Just like I was talking about, I was focusing a lot of my energy in please think you're worth more than 10,000. Like, right. Focusing on not feeling that way, rather than focusing on feeling, what does 10 billion feel like?
I've said this a lot in my office. Most people live their life to not experience something, as opposed to create something. And that's a big shift I've done myself. Instead of seeking to not be poor, what does wealth feel like? Mm-hmm. What do I actually want to create?
I love what you said about we live to feel, mm-hmm. because even from like a mystical concept that we've talked about is like, you came from somewhere else and you agreed to, I agreed at some other location at some other time to come inhabit this carbon-based body and experience the life that I'm experiencing. Mm-hmm. Probably was shown the whole life of, this is what it will be like. Do you want to go do that? And I think the opportunity that does not exist in a different dimension is you are agreeing to go feel that, because in another dimension, feelings, it would feel different. So you are agreeing to an experience of feeling when you come to Earth. And why, I don't exactly know, but I think that there's I think that is the point of living, is to feel it.
To embody it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about that question a lot.
Yeah.
What is the point? Yeah, I think it's to just experience, to learn, evolve, grow, all kinds of terms you can use.
I would agree. So if we if we bring that concept back to a money mindset, how do we practically start moving forward in learning to feel that and learning to expand what that is and what that capacity is? Because I think we need to learn how to experience that before it hits us in the face and it slides off the cliff because we have nowhere for it to land.
So if you think about money, what's the very first thing you feel?
What's the very first thing I feel?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the worst person to ask about this. I try to push those things as far as
I know. That's why I'm asking you.
I know, it's because I don't know. Let me think about it. Let me feel about it. I don't know.
Don't think about it. Just answer. What do you feel?
I don't know.
Let me ask it differently.
Honestly, I don't know.
Do you feel at peace?
I think so.
Do you feel joy?
I don't feel joy.
Okay. So
I don't feel anxious.
Okay. So it's not a thought issue.
It doesn't feel like
it's a feeling issue.
Negative.
Okay.
But
so does it feel neutral?
It feels pretty neutral. Maybe that's why I don't know what I feel.
What do you believe? Do you love money?
I wouldn't say I love money, but I think money loves me. I have gotten to that place recently.
Okay.
I actually think that.
So now, if something loves you and you don't love it in return, why?
Because there's a concern about, the love of money and all the things the Bible says about the love of money.
So it's a root of all sorts of evil, right?
It's the root of all sorts of evil. And truly, I mean, it's been years of process with this, and I'm just going to tell you where I am with this. I've been consciously shifting how I perceive money from like this life force, this thing that gives life, into a tool that is helpful to accomplish the things that I need to accomplish.
Right.
And that feels different. And it feels less like life and death to me. Like we were talking about that threshold and like making a living. I think a lot of people have that threshold of like, what is this that then makes me feel like I can live? And I've been really trying to shift that into, here's a tool and it's helpful to be able to do this, and it's a helpful tool to be able to do this, but it doesn't come with like love.
So go back to the statement you made that, so if you think about that phrase, the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, what do you feel?
Icky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you feel icky, then you're not going to associate love with money because you've been taught love money is bad.
Right. But I also don't love my toothbrush. And it's a helpful tool that I use every day.
Let me
Do you know what I mean?
twist it just a little bit then. You know the word enjoy, right? Sure. Which is ENJOY. Right. I think a better spelling of that is INJOY. Mm-hmm. So we talked about we live to feel. What do we want to feel? What's the feeling that everybody seeks to feel?
Joy, love.
Okay.
Peace.
Okay.
Comfort.
I think that the most common word, correct? For me, it's peace of mind, joy of heart, love of soul. Okay. So if I'm in peace, in joy, in love, in all things, even your toothbrush, it isn't the toothbrush, it's being in a state of love, in a state of joy, in a state of peace in any interaction. We're going to get silly here for a sec. So if you love your toothbrush, you take better care of your toothbrush, right?
I suppose so, yes.
If you don't love it, then you don't take care of it.
Right.
Now I know that's
I might use it to scrub the toilet.
I hope not.
Well, I wouldn't.
Only one time.
Use it again.
I know that's an extreme, but you get the point I'm making.
Sure.
So money's the same thing. You're neutral because you are taught you're not supposed to love money. Well, is that true or not true? And I think part of the problem is I think the word that's used there for love it's not love. Right. Because if you truly love people, you don't put money above people. If you truly love God, you don't put money above God because it's It's all part of God. And so I think, to me, those two phrases don't go together. Love of money, that's how that's described. I don't agree with that, because I don't think that's really what's meant by that whole concept.
I mean, it's kind of the concept of like idolatry, which is what you said
Yes.
about you're putting it at the forefront.
Right.
But what you were just talking about, even with the toothbrushes, being in a state of love while using your toothbrush,
Yes,
is not the same as being in love with your toothbrush.
I think that's where that word starts to fail too, because
The love word.
yes, because if you're putting money above God, you're not in love, because God is love.
Right.
So I'm like, I think even that phrase, to a degree, is almost that's a misnomer, or that can't exist.
It's like an oversimplified term. I think.
I know,
mean,
and that's
love in
part of the
itself,
yes, and
yeah,
that's part of the
it's-
problem
yeah.
is you're using a word that I'm like, that's not love.
Right.
So in some essence, it's almost impossible to love money.
Is it though? Honestly, have you ever known of someone, or heard of someone even, that does put wealth and their money above people?
Is that love?
Well, what is that is exchanged in relationship? That should be love. And if that is forsaken for the sake of money,
That's not
then
love.
the love of money is not love. I would argue that maybe it is, because there is still this flow of energy of valuing one thing over another, which, love flows in that, right? It is a preferential feeling.
Love is what?
Do you want me to do
Yes.
attitudes?
Well, no, here's what I'm going to give you a simple math equation. The Bible says God is love. That means God equals love, which means you can also flip it and go, love is God. At least this is just my opinion. There's people that would disagree with me. So my point is, if you're going, love is money, that's not true.
I'm not saying love is money, but is there a love for money?
There is a focus, there is an attention, there is an importance. In my thinking, that's not love. Because if love is God, if you're putting money as the most important thing, that's not love. That you're setting it as, again, to me, this is where words start to fail. Because yes, we think of it in that way, but in my mind, if you're going to say what love truly is, I like to simplify it down to that. And I think that's the problem, is we're using love. When people go, I love this hamburger. No, you enjoy the taste of it, or you find it tasty.
Did you say you love a hammer and you like the taste
hamburger?
of it? Oh.
And I say, actually,
I heard hamburger.
Thank you, because I just had a very tasty hamburger from. Have you guys ever eaten at Sweet Spot?
No.
I hadn't either. We had this hamburger that was a combination of like elk and
just the look on his face looks like love.
It was pleasure.
I was going to say pleasure.
It was very much pleasure. Well, that kind of gets in this concept too. Sometimes we'll say, I love it. Well, is that really the most accurate word that describes it? I experienced extreme pleasure, and I find that's like when people say, oh, this is so good. Well, and they can be talking about like Coke or, some sugary drink. And I'm like, is it really good, or is it tasty?
Yeah. Coca-Cola is
great. It's tasty. It is not good. Yeah,
no free ads.
I don't want to be sued. No. I know I'm getting really picky about words, and that's just how I'm like, okay, what is the most accurate word to describe the experience? And if you're going to say the love of money, I don't think that's the best word.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
How about the importance of money?
Do you love money? Because that was the question you asked me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you love money?
Okay.
Is that
I'm going to
the-
contradict.
Is that the feeling that you feel?
What I want to feel or want to experience, because I think love is more of an experience even than it is a feeling. I think feelings come with it because I think joy
Sure.
is the feeling, love is the experience or the belief.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to contradict myself and say yes. In the framework of, I think money is part of love or can dwell within love.
Do you think there's anything that could not dwell within love?
No. Because that means it would have to be outside of God.
I know, I agree.
Good. Glad we're on the same page.
I love your emphasis on the words, though, because I've been reading this book. It's called Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole premise of the book is we don't have enough words to describe our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're using inadequate words that don't actually describe how we feel. And therefore, our bodies aren't able to really process the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So we get stuck somewhere because, and like the example that really stood out in my mind is she was talking about the difference between envy and jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really common for us to like look at someone's pictures from vacation and say, oh, I'm so jealous, but really you're envious.
Mm-hmm.
Like that would be the better word to use.
Right.
And if you're, but there is a, like, there's almost a playfulness with saying, oh, I'm so jelly. Like,
Right.
like there's almost a playfulness with it, which is what she talks about in the book. Whereas envy is one of the 7 deadly sins and has kind of a negative connotation with it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's harder for you to say, oh, I'm actually feeling envious of your vacation. It's way easier to say, oh, I'm feeling jelly of it, because that isn't actually how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You're using an inadequate term to describe it. And so like Bree and I were just talking on the drive up here today about the importance of how you define things, because it really brings way more clarity and solidity to what you're trying to express.
Well, and I think too, if you use inaccurate words, it can't process, it can't move forward.
Right.
Because you're not being honest.
Right. And I think the English translation of the Bible does a huge disservice, especially with love.
Absolutely.
Because there's like 7 different words that we translate into love. There's like 20 different words that we translate into worship. Like there's all this meaning packed in one word instead of allowing it to expand and be fruitful. And there are some translations that do, but in general, we've memorized these verses as the love of money is the root of evil, instead of like, well, what type of love was it actually talking about? And how, like, what is it actually saying? Because most of the time in Western society, when you say love, your mind goes to romantic feings.
Right.
But there's way more definitions just within the Bible.
Right.
Yeah. I was grateful that you were bringing up the importance of learning to define it better, because I totally agree with what you said. I don't think your body can process it until you can adequately express exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm. I think it ties in that concept of love and truth. It has to be both. So, yeah, I pay a lot of attention to the words people use. I think if you want to get to know yourself, listen to the words you use, and you'll get a whole lot of insight into yourself.
Yeah, one of my favorites that we talk about all the time is how you challenged my usage of the word "but," just because it doesn't allow both possibilities to exist. And I think that's an amazing thing. So I could say, from our test we did earlier, I was scared that my body was going to get stuck at 10,000, but it didn't. when a way better wording of it would be, I was scared my body was going to get stuck at 10,000 and it didn't. Because both of those were true.
Right. Now, if you want to add another layer, is you felt scared that it was going to get stuck, as opposed to I was.
Yeah.
That's a state of being as opposed to an experience.
Yeah. That's an important distinction too, because the learning to understand that not all of your thoughts are your thoughts and not all of your feelings are you. Is a big deal.
It's absolutely a big deal. That's one of the things I'm working on in my own personal journey is I've been doing the activations I told you about. One is just having a different relationship with money. And as I'm going, okay, if I have a hang up, where did I learn that? Where did that come from? And I was trying to I was going through and going, where did my concepts of money come into play? And one of the ones I know is in there is this concept. Well, Jesus was poor. So he was a poor preacher and went around and didn't have money. And
yeah, except for when he was born, 3 kings showed up and bestowed gold and all sorts of other stuff.
I understand that.
We were just talking about this while we were waiting about how we Sunday school stories to the point where it's meaningless, but he literally had kings show up to his birth and give him gifts.
Yeah.
You think they showed up with, here's my little tin can with 2 pieces of gold. I hope it's good enough for the savior of the world.
Right.
They brought camels.
Right.
Dude was rich.
It's it's funny because as you say it, it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. I still feel the other.
Exactly.
And I'm going, okay. One of the other really big concepts I'm working on personally is the concept of choice, because as long as I allow that to stay here, I'm making choices based upon that belief. And unless I get to the place that I go, wow, somebody taught me this, and I'm either going to choose to continue to believe it or I'm going to choose a different pathway, I will be influenced by that belief. And so that's one of the things I'm really working to do is going, okay, am I truly choosing this, or is this just old patterns that I've been taught? One of the other things that really came out in that activation too is the concept of, let's say you grew up with parents that really struggle with poverty or a poverty mindset. Are you going to choose the same thing? Just because they chose that thought process, are you going to choose the same thing? You don't have to.
You don't have to, but isn't it? I would guess that it is harder. There's an extra hurdle because we learn by watching, like that's how we mature as children. Right. And so the pattern that is imprinted on you early is going to be one of a poverty mindset. And so there's an additional hurdle that person has to overcome versus the child who is born into a wealthy family. Not that they both don't have money mindsets to work through and learn, but I think there's an additional hurdle. Actually, now that I'm saying it, maybe not, because
well, it's funny because it's only a hurdle until you realize you're making the choice.
Yeah.
Once you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm choosing this.
Yeah.
Once you realize it's a choice, then it's not a hurdle at all, because let's see, am I going to intentionally choose to be poor, or am I going to choose to have wealth? Now, if I believe that I'm called to live a certain type of lifestyle of low means for a certain reason, that's one thing. That's not what most people are going to choose.
So how much impact does you recognizing I'm making this choice have before you feel that truth? Like,
it's a good question.
Explain that a little bit. I think I know what you're asking.
So if the switch flips when we realize we're making a choice,
right,
but there's still some belief, some felt lived experience that's opposite.
Okay.
When does the pendulum shift when more of the energy is flowing into the new choice?
I think a couple things. One is how long it's been there, and how much emotion is attached to it as well. So, because even once you realize you have a choice, there's still the habit you have. It's literally wired into your DNA or into your cellular function, into your neurology. I've had this multiple times where I'm like, this is occurring out of a pattern, not because I want this or not because this is I'm not consciously choosing this. So I have to be aware that I'm unconsciously choosing and then go, okay, yeah, let me replace that again. So until it becomes a habit the other way, and it's sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast, depending upon what the scenario is. That just varies. So it's interesting to feel something and go, no, that's not me. And it almost feels like a foreign body to a degree. Because you go, this is not you don't identify with it anymore. It's just a pattern that's there. You go.
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting concept because I've done work with some of those things before too, and you make the conscious decision, like you choose this, but then the rest of my being that isn't my consciousness, it's not my mind, will, and emotions, goes, that's not what we're doing. You know what I mean? And at least in my experience, and I'd really be curious to hear both of your experiences too. In my experience, I have to choose it, like consciously choose it over and over and over until it's not just a head choice. It is a whole everything choice. We're all on board with this and we're all going the same direction.
Yep.
Have you had the same experience?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, to me, you almost have to bring everything up to the conscious, and then you make a choice. Then you got to shift it back down into the unconscious, and both of those are a process,
right? And sometimes there's a fight.
Yep.
Like that has happened. I've had my body buck against things
that means there's also something you're not consciously aware of,
right?
That you haven't addressed,
right? Or a distrust. I mean. I don't know how many times I've done things in my life that's against what my body is telling me is safe or okay. And then I go along all la-di-da, like, oh, this is fine. And then later it comes back up and my body's like, oh, I don't trust you anymore. What are you doing? I'm not on board with that. We're not doing that again.
If you want to get really interesting, sometimes that's not you, that's your ancestry.
That doesn't trust?
That is bucking up against it. Because you have patterns that are in your genetics.
Yeah, when you're breaking patterns and bloodlines.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've dealt with it yourself. Sometimes you also have to deal with the story that's in there too. And you go, oh, okay, this isn't my story that's coming up per se. I've felt that too, where it's like I'm going, this is not me. I'm experiencing something this isn't me. This is in my genetics.
That's interesting. We were talking about a few weeks ago how, at least for me, like through a lot of the spiritual journey, there's been so much of like unwinding what's been in bloodline stuff and breaking the curses that were there and undoing the patterns that were unhealthy. But there's also a concept of like accepting and appreciating and stepping into the blessings that came with your bloodline too.
Yes.
Because there can be things that are learned, like a money mindset.
Right.
About poverty and about greed, which are very related. If you didn't know, they're almost exactly the same energy. There are things that can be learned that unconvince you from what has actually been passed down to you. You know what I mean? And so sometimes, and I've experienced this, sometimes you have to go and embrace the things that have been passed down because they actually are for your benefit and it is your inheritance. It is the legacy that was left.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that too.
And that's an interesting thing too.
It is to go, okay, this protected me from a certain thing. Now I know I don't need that anymore. Now I can move into this other vein that I'm going, okay, this no longer serves me. So now what are we moving into? The other thing I think is really important along with that journey is what are you creating? Because again, a lot of times we're trying to clean up something. Okay, that's great. What are you going to replace it with? Because if you don't replace, then you go back to default. And that's where I spend a lot of my time too, going, okay, what am I moving towards, not what I'm getting away from.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction, and something that has helped me is starting to think about where I want to be rather than where I don't want to be.
Yep.
And so, thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't want this car. I don't want this house. I don't want this job. I don't want this money. Like, instead of thinking about what you do want. And it's like in my mind, it's like a tricky thing, because there's a difference between like being like, oh my gosh, like I can't wait to like have a Lamborghini, versus like just dreaming about having a more reliable car. And maybe it's just the stepping stone of which one comes first. But in my mind, you can almost dream so big that it's the same as dreaming poor, because it keeps you in that lack place.
Because it's so far away. It's almost like you can't reach it.
Yeah.
You're trying to create an answer for your poverty is really what you're doing.
It's
and it's
safe
not the
to
answer.
dream. It's safe to dream this big because it is unobtainable.
Right.
So, but it's scary to dream this big because that might actually be obtainable if I just had a different job. Like,
and then you have the face the potential of, okay, and then if I don't attain it, then that means something about me.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think the fear of success is such a real thing. People talk about the fear of failure all the time, but I think the fear of success is also very much a real thing that holds people back, because they'll build that path and they'll say, well, what if this? Well, that seems too big for me. And like, will hold themselves back almost, because it seems like they're not worthy.
I think we're going after the wrong thing, because we said we live to feel, right? What feeling are you creating? Now, so I was going to say, what feeling do you want? So if, we talked about wordplay. Explain a desire without using the word want. So here's...
Well, in my mind, I would just say I would desire that instead of want.
Right. Which still means you're lacking, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you describe the state without using those words?
I don't think you can do
I don't
that.
know you can. It's fairly synonymous.
I don't know that you can.
I think
specifically.
I was challenged by this person. I'm going, okay, let me kind of process this. If I use the word want and desire, then that's your state. You're describing your state, and you're in a state of want or lack.
Yeah.
If you say I am, then you're not lacking. Now, the question is, do you believe your statement?
Right. I was going to say you could just create another conflict.
Well, because the problem, and this is where sometimes positive affirmations don't work, because you don't fully believe them. So you have to be able to say it with belief.
Yeah, and I think you have to change it. So like when you said, can you describe a desire without the word want? I don't think you can with a specific thing. I think you could with a general feeling, which is the same as the positive affirmation. Like you'll create a conflict in yourself if you say, like, if your leg is broken and you say, my leg is fine, I am healed. Like you create a conflict within yourself. Or if you are broke and you say, I am rich. Well, you're creating a conflict. Or I am financially wealthy. You're creating a conflict because you know you're not. But you could say, I feel rich. I feel wealthy. And even still having $10 in your bank, you might feel that way. And so that's like I think you can describe a desire without want using the concept of it or the broad picture of it, but not the specific piece of it.
I think part of what I'm driving to with this is want and desire are feelings also.
Yeah.
What is your ideal state?
I don't know that I would have always answered this, but I think my ideal state is being able to feel everything and return to an equilibrium.
Okay. Explain that a little bit further.
Okay, so for most of
Or give
my
me an
life,
example.
most of my life, I have attempted to not feel so that I can stay at an equilibrium.
Okay.
Out of fear that if I felt the extreme, I wouldn't be able to come back to an equilibrium. So I'm, when I was processing anxiety, there was a fear that I was never going to come back from anxiety. But if I could, in a healthy way, say, no, actually, I want to feel that fear. I want to look at what I'm afraid of. What is causing the anxiety? I want to look at it, feel through it, and know I can return back. Then on the other end, can I experience extreme joy and know this doesn't, like, it's not disappointing if this doesn't stay here all the time, and come back to an equilibrium? Because, like, if we live to feel and I'm muting the extremes, then I'm only living in a small box. If I can allow myself to get to the point where I can feel the extent of the feeling and know that I can come back to the middle ground, then that is how I want to live. I want to be able to fully feel it and know that I can be in a neutral spot.
Okay.
That's a good answer, Josh.
Well, I don't think
It
I
is.
would have been able to answer that a year ago because I wasn't in that spot and I didn't have a value for feelings.
If you're completely whole, do you think you feel the negative feelings, or are they just?
Yeah, I do. I
Okay.
think that is the joy of life,
Is to feel that.
is to feel. And so, like, even the extreme, like, I think of Jesus in the garden before his crucifixion where he's sweating blood. I think he was terrified of what he was about to do. But he returned to that place of, okay, now I can walk through it. And I think that is, we were just talking about this. I think the distance between things is what gives something value. So the upper end of the feeling is muted by the extent that I'm also not feeling the lower extent of it, because I think it's the same energy.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's just the way it is being perceived and felt in me. So fear and joy, I think, are very, very similar. Like, I can feel terrified of an interview that's coming up, or I can feel really excited about it. And it's the same energy. It's how I'm thinking about it. But I think to the extent you mute either direction of it, you're counter muting the other side. So if you don't allow yourself to feel really sad about, like, a family member dying, like, are you actually, like, can you fully live it? Can you fully process it if you don't allow yourself to really feel it? I think sometimes what happens is people do get stuck in the extremes, and then you, like, can't navigate back to normal. But if I can go all the way down into the depths, if I can go all the way down into hell and feel it, and then come back to the middle, I think I'm more full than if I only felt the upper end.
Okay. Sorry. Whew. I was excited by that.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell.
It's interesting. That expands what I've thought. Because I think I have thought when you get to wholeness, all there is peace, joy, and love.
That's interesting. I think what's riveting about what you just described, Josh, is the ability.
It was riveting to me. That's why I yelled.
The ability to go to the extremes, but not be completely devastated on either side. Because I think that complete euphoria could also cause devastation, and complete sorrow or fear. You could get to the point of devastation, but being willing to embrace them and still know you want to come back to the middle. This is why I think it's riveting, and it's a different word than interesting, because that's all I ever use.
That's interesting.
I know.
That's funny.
But I really think that that's what it is. It's going out and it's stretching yourself to be able to go beyond without devastation. But I think that's what Jesus experienced too. He was in the garden and he was sweating the blood, and he was feeling these really negative things without devastation, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, it did not annihilate him, and it didn't actually cause him to not move forward. He still felt them very deeply,
the
though.
Difference between I am and I feel.
Maybe.
Sorry.
Just hoping.
I appreciate it. Nobody heard anything for all the last hour that we've been talking.
I guarantee
we got to start all over.
I think that's it. And I think for me, the important part is being able to move between them.
There's still movement.
I think the movement's the important part, because
is it kind of the yin and yang concept?
If you get to the euphoria, sometimes I have experienced myself not allowing myself to feel really happy, because I'm like, well, this isn't sustainable. No, actually it's not.
Right.
And so if you can learn, I can come visit here anytime I want. Then then you don't have to be worried about like cutting it off or holding it as tight as you can.
It's not lack.
Yeah.
Right.
It just is experiencing life. It's living to feel.
Well, sometimes I think what we think about what we feel is even more important than what we actually feel.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's like we think fear is bad. Well, is it really bad, or is it just... I say frequently, feelings are just a way from the body for the body to communicate with the head. So if the body, because you don't tend to feel in your head, you feel in your body. So if you feel something in your body, then what is the body actually saying? And if you can learn to just perceive all feelings as beneficial, then we're not fighting against it.
Even if you don't put the term beneficial, but if you just say, like, all feelings are just feelings, like,
right,
you just allow them to be what they are. It's just energy, that's
information too.
Yeah. You know, sometimes I watch podcasts that are 2 or 3 hours long, and I'm like, how do they do that? And then I look at the clock and I'm like, we've been here like an hour and 15 minutes. And I'm
did we actually talk about, that's the thing I always find about our podcast.
So
we start with this
money mindset.
No, we had definitely talked about money mindsets, even if it's not specifically directly of it.
Right.
But I think it's great, because it's a totally different dynamic sitting in the same room recording it versus our last one we did on Zoom. Like, there's just it's so much easier to just flow in the conversation and let the conversation transform.
Yeah.
Well, and isn't money just a manifestation of our emotions to a degree? What you do with money is a manifestation of your beliefs. If you believe you're wealthy, you will have a lot of it. And if you believe you're lacking, you don't. And that's one of the other things. I know I keep referencing this, so you guys ought to check out Brian Scott activations. Are really interesting. And do you see money as sand slipping through your hands, or do you see it as an energy that's flowing through you?
Mm-hmm.
That's something we've talked about recently too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because all of that affects how you interact with it. Because it's kind of like you said, emotions are they're just feelings. Well, what do you do with them? Money's the same thing. It's money in and of itself is neither good nor bad. It just is. It's what you do with it.
Right.
So,
well, and it's an interesting thing. See, it's very interesting that I said interesting again, because it's quite interesting.
What was the other word you used?
Riveting. I don't know that I think this is riveting, but
it is interesting.
It is a little interesting. I think another way that you can really look at it is, how is money serving you in any certain circumstance, right? And I do think there's a vast difference between how is money serving you versus how are you serving money.
Absolutely.
Because it just positionally and in a hierarchy kind of look. I mean, if you're putting it above yourself, like, is it carrying more energy than you are? Does it have more authority than you do in your own life? Those kinds of things, I think that can really determine how you interact with it. I mean, you could have $5 and I could have $5. And if I'm serving my money, then it will be different for me than if it's serving you.
Right.
You know? And I think that's a little shift that can be huge over time, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I find myself a lot of times holding tightly to it, and money is meant to flow. And if you hold tight, then you're not going to tend to have a lot flow back to you.
Yeah.
So I'm like going.
I know it's it is so interesting. I'm
It's
going to stop. I'm going to stop saying it. I'll say
riveting.
it so many times that I'll stop saying it. But I mentioned this earlier, but I really do believe that greed and poverty are so closely related, because how do they both get outworked in your lives is you hold on to what you have and don't want to let it go.
Right.
They're both hoarding words.
They're yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also lacking trust.
Yes. There's the lack again.
Mm-hmm.
We actually just had a guest on who talked about how the world system is built on the concept of lack. And it's really shifted a lot of how I've been looking at things just in the last few days since we talked to him. But it goes so right along with what we're talking about tonight. I mean, I've even been thinking about, you know, people are like, oh, how have you been? And it's the holiday season and I want to be like, oh, I'm so busy. But even that is like this mindset of lack. I don't have enough time.
Right.
You know, I don't have enough time in the day. I don't have energy to give to something else. You know what I mean? And so I've really been trying to reframe that and see it not from a place of lack, because that, to me, that's speaking of lack.
Right.
And that's something I need to adjust, because I actually think that I have all the time in the world.
That's a very interesting point.
Isn't it interesting?
It is, actually. Because I also think it's funny, too, how we make busyness a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're busy, then you're successful.
Right. You must be very important. You must have a lot of influence.
That's right. Yeah. It's, again, gets back to that words we use to describe experiences. I'm like, it's really you're describing your perception of experiences.
Yeah. 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 And I think it's a different value system. You know? Same with like, is money serving you or are you serving money? It's a different value system. Right?
I thought a lot about, you know, you talked about making a living. Why is that a concept that we focus on so much too?
I don't know. It's there though, isn't it?
It's there in Western culture for sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
But
yeah.
I would like,
Not all cultures are that way.
I know you were talking about it in like this cool way of like earning a living, but I'm thinking from a different side of it, being taught a living wage, you're earning a living. Like, that's words we use all the time, is to some extent a lack mindset that is embedded in you to say, like, this is all you need. Like,
right.
If you just say, well, I'm earning a living, like, what that implies is lack.
It absolutely does.
But I think in the way you sort of mentioned it earlier, if you were to say, I'm earning a living.
That's so funny because I meant it the other way.
Did you?
And you heard it a different way.
I heard it a different way. But I'm thinking, like, if you could use that in the way of saying, man, I'm earning a living. Like, I'm alive. Like, you can use it in an abundance way as well. But I think in society, it is created as
a lack mindset.
It's a lack mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm earning enough to live.
Yeah.
It also gets into that concept of I'm trading my time for this amount of resources that I can really survive is a better word than live.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And that's another concept I got for those that are wealthy don't think in those terms.
Right.
They think of how can I influence, how can I impact, how do I invest my time?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because it's really a tool in their tool belt, right? It's not the entire tool belt.
Right.
It is just a thing that they can use.
Well, they value time way more than they value money.
I think we all do.
Yes.
We just don't know to use those terms.
Well, not only that, what were you taught? Were you taught to value time?
Most people probably not.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
My dad worked at a factory for an hourly rate, I'm sure. And that's what I saw most people do.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting.
So if I'm going to do something different, I have to learn a different way. Which is why I listen to activations and
challenge belief systems.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, which gets back to the idea of choice. I'm either going to choose to just go with the default I was given, or I'm going to choose to do different. And I don't mean that in any way offensive to anybody that's doing that. I think we're called to abundance.
I think so too.
And it's not just about the dollar amount. It's the life.
No, it's the life.
Jesus
said, I came to give life and life abundantly.
Yes.
And that's all the things that are included in life.
Right. Well, I find it interesting because I go back to what my concept was. Okay, yeah, Jesus said I came to give you life abundant. Oh, wait, you were poor. So abundance is poverty. That's really what's inside me, even though that logically does not make sense.
Yeah. I mean, no, it doesn't.
So part of me is trying to get one avenue and part of me is seeking to get another avenue, and they're constantly fighting. And that's why I've lived most of my life kind of stuck in this middle place. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this anymore.
That's fascinating because it's like you're in this dichotomy and both sides are pulling. And so you're really going nowhere.
Right. So your energy is divided. And so you don't get.
Yeah.
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 You just kind of get stuck.
A house divided can't stand.
That's right.
I think, as much as that applies to relationships and things externally, I think it very much so applies internally.
Exactly.
For sure.
Well, I think we have given people way enough to chew on. I know I need to chew on it. And we probably need to have a bunch more of these conversations.
Abundantly more, you might say.
Abundantly more. Definitely not a lack more.
We need to have riveting more conversations.
Yes, much more riveting conversations.
Well, as always, it's an honor to have you here with us. Thank you for participating. If you enjoyed this, please consider becoming a YouTube member and check out the part where he actually muscle tests us to see what our numbers were.
Oh, yeah, don't forget about that part.
It's pretty interesting.
But we're also going to do it afterwards.
We are also going to do it afterwards to see
changed.
just if anything changed.
Yeah.
So
we're going to get Josh over $1 billion.
Let's go.
I'm going to get Kim to $2.
He's going to start me at $1.50.
I'm going to get you to $2.
Oh, funny. Thanks for joining. We will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.